Chapter 31. Su Fengnian laughed aloud and said, I was just saying it casually. In any case, I will be a good person. Whether you appreciate it or not, it has nothing to do with me. I like the way you are, always letting me take advantage of you. Doing business with you is the most profitable. Before leaving, Su Fengnian stabbed this little maidservant with a sentence. No matter how shabby your clothes are, aren't they still my things? If you have the ability to take them off, then you will be a heroine. Zhang and I pretended not to hear. When she bickered with the shameless and thick-skinned Su Fengnian, she always lost more than she won. Thinking about it carefully, she might not even be able to gain the upper hand even once. After Su Fengnian, who was in a good mood, saw Yu Wei, his mood became even better. Nyang Qin once said that for a beautiful girl, no matter if he had the temperament of a bodhisattva or the heart of a snake or scorpion, he would still feel sorry for her. In his nearly 20 years of life, Su Fengnian had never done anything ruthless. On the contrary, he had directly or indirectly saved the lives of more than 20 maidservants who were as lowly as dust. Yu Wei was lazily lying in the warm bedroom, teasing the chubby Wu Mainyang whose fur was as white as snow. Every time it snowed, Su Fengnian would want to throw Wu Mainyang into the snow to see if she could distinguish the innocent cat from the white snow. He had been holding back this kind of evil interest, thinking that when Yu Wei and Wu Mainyang separated, he would definitely give it a try. Su Fengnian took off his boots and lay down beside Yu Wei. Leaning on her warm and graceful body, he closed his eyes to rest and said softly, I went to Mount Wudong and gave a good beating to a Taoist priest of the same generation as the sect leader. Wasn't that amazing? Yu Wei smiled faintly and said, It was the great pillar of the country that was amazing. Su Fengnian opened his eyes and turned her around. He gave her a hard smack on her round, peach-shaped buttocks and lectured, This prince will personally teach you how to flatter. Yu Wei blushed slightly. Su Fengnian was just about to take advantage of the situation when the light voice of Wutong Garden's second-rank maid, Lu Yi, came from the courtyard. She said that a letter from Mount Longhu had arrived. Su Fengnian didn't have time to take advantage of Yu Wei. He hastily put on his boots and ran out of the room to take the letter. Seeing that Lu Yi's slender shoulders were covered in snow, he smiled and gently brushed it off for her. When he arrived at his own Wutong Garden, he found that the floor tiles here were the best. It was fine to go barefoot as it wasn't hot or cold. It couldn't even compare to Su Zhao's room. Su Fengnian enjoyed being needed by his first-rank maid and took out the letter. Oh, that old Taoist from Mount Longhu with the surname Zhao had good handwriting. Taking a closer look, his younger brother's cultivation at Mount Longhu was described as vigorous and courageous, advancing 1,000 miles in a day. To Su Fengnian, who had heard too much bureaucratic jargon, this kind of overflowing praise was already very impressive even if half of the exaggeration was taken out. It seemed that Huang Man didn't go in vain. At the end of the letter, he carefully mentioned that Su Longxiang was homesick, so the old Taoist implored His Royal Highness to write a letter home so that his disciple could cultivate in peace. After Su Fengnian put down the letter, he waved his hand and said, Grind. Immediately, the room began to grind with bare hands. After Su Fengnian picked up the brush, he began to hesitate. For a moment, he didn't know where to start. He almost scratched his ears and cheeks. There was a saying that when it came to using books, one would regret not having enough of them. Su Fengnian simply put down the brush and rubbed his head against his first-rank maid's full breasts. He asked, Did that rouge eater from the Lin family see Su Xiao? Sweet Potato said coquettishly, He saw him, but he didn't want to leave. Su Fengnian smirked and said, Could it be that this debauchee wants to eat your rouge? Green Ant said with disdain, That tattered embroidered pillow is not worthy of our sister's attention. Su Fengnian rolled his eyes and said, Am I not an embroidered pillow? Sweet Potato's hands gently wrapped around His Royal Highness, squeezing her firm breasts into an astonishing curve. She said with natural charm, His Royal Highness is not a pillow, your servant is. Su Fengnian smiled and said, This little mouth of yours is quite impressive. Green Ant sat a little further away, picking up and putting down the chess pieces again and again, bored to death. Su Fengnian sat up straight and looked outside the room. Unsurprisingly, Blue Bird, the eccentric maid, was in a daze again. Wutong Garden was a small sparrow, but it had all the essentials. In addition to the fourth-rank maids and female servants, there were all kinds of odd-job workers. Because of His Royal Highness, they had a very high status in Bailiang Palace. not to mention the first-rank maids that Su Fengnian especially favored. Even the second-rank maids were welcomed with smiles by the housekeepers and gatekeepers. Of these maids, Sweet Potato, who was nicknamed Red Deer, had a weak personality and was easy to talk to. Bluebird was the complete opposite. She was respectful and close to Su Fengnian, but she did not follow blindly. Su Fengnian had been mischievous since he was young and had caused trouble many times. It was always the Bluebird, whose temper was like a red-maned horse, who cleaned up his messes. Speaking of Bluebird, ever since Su Fengnian was sensible, he had felt that she was always by his side. It was Wang Fei who had personally led her to him. She was not like a maid, but more like an older sister. She was not very close to the other maids in Wutong Garden. She was born with a cold face and a cold heart. Every year, she would not be in the Wang Fu for a few periods of time, but every time she came back, she would give His Royal Highness a small object that she cared about. After a small incident in his youth, Su Fengnian had kept it. Generally speaking, the people in Wutong Garden were all people with no big stories. They were pleasant people, but after chewing and chewing, they were bland and thin. It seemed that this was all because the great pillar state could not tolerate sand in his eyes. Su Fengnian did his best to empty out the ink in his pocket before he could barely write a letter to the Feng family. It was long-winded and long-winded. It was all trivial matters, the complete opposite of his original intention. In the end, he had to comfort himself that if he wrote too profound, Huang Manor would not understand. It was best to be straightforward. After he finished writing the letter, Su Fengnian stretched and went out of the room. As expected, he saw Bluebird standing in the corridor of the courtyard, lost in thought. He looked at the sky. The heavy snow had stopped for a while, and it was the best time to travel at night. He pulled Bluebird out of Wutong Garden and planned to go to Fengyi Hall to tease the sickly and pitiful Fan Mimi. As for Lin Tanhua, Su Fengnian felt that she was very much to Li Hanlin's liking. On the way, Su Fengnian remembered that today seemed to be his dog's day. He smiled and asked, "Has there been any movement in the Fu?" Bluebird's reply was as concise and clear as ever. "There has been." Su Fengnian's spirits were roused. He smiled and asked, "Is it going to the Tide Listening Pavilion, or is it looking for Su Xiao?" Bluebird shook her head and said, "I don't know." Su Fengnian sighed with regret. There are fewer and fewer people taking the bait these days. His Royal Highness had nothing to do these past few years, so he deliberately let the usually heavily guarded Bailiang Palace relax for a period of time, but keep it tight inside. He called it fishing, and it was specifically used to lure in those Jianghu heroes who coveted the secret manuals of the martial arts library, or those hot-blooded assassins who were full of enemies. There had been a card day 4 or 5 years ago, and at most, it had lured in 4 groups of uninvited guests. After a round of beating, it was said that 26 corpses were dragged out the next day to be chopped up and fed to the dogs. After returning from his travels, he had played cards twice, but there had been no harvest. Presumably, those uncivilized heroes had come to their senses, and there were very few fish and shrimps that had fallen for the bait. He just didn't know what the results would be today. Su Fengnian's extreme boredom could be seen. Bluebird suddenly stopped and looked back at Wutong Garden. Su Fengnian asked in a low voice, "What's the matter?" She said softly, "Nothing." Su Fengnian suppressed the doubts in his heart and went to the Phoenix Rites Pavilion. When he entered the room, he saw Sister Fan talking with the one surnamed Lin. Seeing Su Fengnian, Miss Fan seemed to be stunned for a moment, while Tanhua Lin looked as if he had lost his parents. From what he had seen and heard in the residence recently, he finally knew that the person in front of him, who claimed to be His Highness's study companion, was the real heir apparent of Prince Liang. He stood up nervously and bowed to the ground, saying in a trembling voice, "Greetings to His Royal Highness." Before Su Fengnian could speak, the noise of the prince's mansion soldiers came from outside the door. Master Lin was confused, but Sister Fan smiled sadly and looked at Su Fengnian with a complicated expression. Yuan Zuozong, who was second only to Chen Zhibao among the Pillar State's adopted sons, walked into the room in armor and held a portrait in his hand. The Bailiang's first general narrowed his beautiful eyes and greeted His Royal Highness. Then he turned to look at the young guests. His eyes instantly turned cold, and he sneered, "Fan Shaochai Linyu, come with me." Tanhua Lin was stunned. He didn't know what was going on, but he had suffered an unexpected disaster. His legs immediately went soft, and he sat down on the chair. The weak Miss Fan was taken away. She spat at Su Fengnian in front of her. She was very tough. As a result, she was slapped out of the room by Yuan Zuozong. She lay in the snow like a pile of mud. Su Fengnian didn't bat an eyelid. He took the portrait from Yuan Zuozong's hand. It was a portrait of himself. It was only 60 or 70% similar, but it was 12% similar. It could be seen that in the eyes of Sister Fan, he was quite insignificant. She didn't even want to look at him. In her mind, he was even more despicable. Su Fengnian sat down with the portrait and smiled. The two special assassins were taken away by Yuan Zuozong. Su Fengnian looked up and asked, "Bluebird, what about Wutong Garden?" She calmly said, "It's all right." Su Fengnian said self-deprecatingly, "Once I drank with Lu Qiuer and got drunk. The fatty said that I had two groups of death guards. One group had 4 people and only had 4 code names. A, B, C, and D. He didn't even know about the other group. Tell me, how many people are there in Wutong Garden? Are they maids or other servants?" She closed her mouth and didn't speak. Su Fengnian looked straight at Bluebird. "Are you one?" Bluebird still didn't speak. Su Fengnian sighed and looked down at the portrait. "If it's safe here, you can leave first." She left quietly without a sound. She came to Wutong Garden. The beautiful maid Sweet Potato was sitting on the railing of the corridor. She was holding a small bronze mirror. Her hands were stained with blood that looked like rouge. It was smeared on her lips. Bluebird's eyes were full of disgust. This head maidservant, who was recognized by everyone in the mansion as weak and soft as a koi fish and needed to be fed by her master to survive, also did not look at the green bird. She only tilted her head and smiled at the mirror. "Is it beautiful?" Bluebird sneered slightly. It was unusually ear-piercing in the silence. Sweet Potato pursed her lips. Under the moonlight and snow, her face was very enchanting. She coquettishly said, "It's good that I'm more beautiful than you." Bluebird turned and left, leaving behind a faint sentence. "You grow old quickly." Sweet Potato didn't refute. Her eyes were hazy as she said to herself, "It's good that I can't live until I'm old."